Hello everyone, and it's my pleasure to be moderating this discussion, a conversation if you like, at Cirtuo's Category Management Conference. And it is my huge pleasure to welcome Dr. Elouise Epstein and Drasko Jelavic of Cirtuo. Perhaps to get going, Elouise, perhaps you'd like to introduce yourself for our viewers.
I would love to. So I'm a partner with Kearney. I have been with the firm almost just about 24 years.
Wow.
And I spend half my time doing digital procurement and supply chain strategy, and the other half researching, writing, and public speaking about the profession.
Wonderful. Lovely to see you. Drasko.
Thank you, Richard. I'm Drasko Jelavic. I'm founder and a CEO of Cirtuo. And in April, it will be actually 25 years that I'm in procurement, so we see a lot of longevity in procurement. I'm also a Kearney consultant. And as we do as Cirtuo, we actually provide the technology to support category managers to develop, execute, and validate their category strategies.
Wonderful. Well, look, I can't think of two better people to have. So, last year we were here, and Elouise, you were a little bit naughty because you decided to try and suggest at a category management conference that it might be dead. Clearly, we're not corpses, we're still alive, so must be still something in it. So look, before we start to dive in, a lot's happened in the last 12 months. What is it that you've seen? Elouise, perhaps I'll start with yourself.
The biggest thing has been the emergence and really embracing of AI for the good and bad, and the bad is the hype and the excitement, and the excitement can be good too, but we have just been inundated with AI. Enough with the hype already.
Okay.
However, underpinning that is been some real tremendous developments outside of procurement, and I think they're starting to make their way into procurement. So I think that's the biggest change that we've seen. The second change that we've seen is a rationalization in the procure tech investments market, where we've seen a bunch of startups, procure tech startups, either partner up, get acquired, or take private equity money. And so what that has created is a change in how and what gets sold to procurement. And I think the last bit I will say is, what I would say from last year is that the old way of doing category management is dead, and we are now into that next generation category management, which is more category intelligence to drive the business versus category management as a function.
Got it. Thank you, Drasko. I mean, you talk to clients day in, day out. I mean, what have you seen happen in the last 12 months? What are your key observations?
Sure. Last 12 months have been really exciting period. I'm actually grateful for that. When I look back for many years being in procurement, they were a kind of one-dimensional, I wouldn't say boring, but a kind of one-dimensional and focused on cost reductions predominantly. And last year, actually, we claimed at the Cirtuo Procurement Forum that we see increase of business requirements, increase of acceleration of market challenges, and there is definitely a shift in the market. So more and more procurement professionals are going back to strategy because they understand it's a good way to manage the complexity, which is actually increasing as the industry landscape is changing, AI is coming. So external forces together with AI drive actually currently the major shift which we see in the mindset of procurement.
Got it. I mean, it's interesting you use the word complexity. I think it's fair to say if we look at the recipe, the landscape is changing, the ingredients are changing, the sense of value is changing. I mean, what impact, Drasko, if I ask you first, what impact do you see that complexity having on organizations as a whole, but the procurement teams within organizations?
Sure, quality and the quantity of business requirements has dramatically increased. As mentioned in the past, it was mainly focused on cost reductions, but now we need to take care of, for example, sustainability, which is often in a conflict to a cost reduction, so you need to accomplish conflictory goals. We need to take care of diversity, and also in many procurement organizations, the growth, supporting the growth and fueling the growth has become really important, because procurement and supply chain often define the art of possible in the business, right? So you can run as far as your suppliers or your third parties can run. And it's important to manage that new complexity. And of course, primarily we talk to large corporations, large organizations, which have complex, multidimensional layers of the organizations and stakeholders, and sometimes even 10,000 of categories and thousands of suppliers. And all of this is changing dynamically, so actually there are everyday challenges to the business. So managing the complexity has become really, really important, and we actually need new tools, new technologies, new way of thinking things and approaching things to manage the emerging complexity.
Elouise, I mean, what's your perspective of that impact of complexity? I mean, as Drasko said, it's more things to think about, more complex ways of working. But I mean, you know, from the work that you do, how are you seeing complexity manifest in different businesses?
Well, I see complexity exactly the same way Drasko does. However, I also think it's artificial. And I think these organizations have built up layers upon layers that get them away from the core business. And what it does is it employs armies of middle managers that are just pushing papers, scheduling meetings. All my clients spend their whole days in meetings. I don't know when anybody does any work. That's probably why they hire consultants, because somebody has to do the work. And so I think that big enterprises have just massive amounts of complexity, and a lot of my work focuses on how digital, or now AI, can eliminate that complexity in the work we do.
Got it. I mean, it's an interesting thing, right? So if we narrow in on procurement, we've got complexity of value, we've got complexity of external factors, we've got the challenge, as you put it, to over complexity of organizations and the need to get through that. So if we look at category management, as you've said, the old way is gone, there's a new way of doing it. You know, is category management a way to address that complexity? Is it valid? Drasko, what do you think?
We believe it's a valid approach. We see that in the practice. We are delivering our technology and services now for 15 years, and we conducted probably 10,000 of category strategy workshops. And I found it always interesting or even amazing when we were discussing and validating strategy with the stakeholders, especially senior stakeholders. They rarely mentioned cost reductions. They were all around the place, but cost reduction was either a hygiene factor, like, okay, procurement is going to take care of that, but they were not necessarily mentioning that, you know. So this is something which I call a procurement dilemma, that on the one hand side, we primarily focus on cost reduction and give a promise to a top management we will deliver it, and then we employ people with such skills, we develop sourcing systems, we develop tools, we develop incentives to incentivize sourcing. But on the other hand side, there is currently accelerated and exploding other demands which procurement need to satisfy, right, and meet. So we learned in our practice that talking about strategy, validating strategy, aligning stakeholders is actually key to grasp the complexity and address the right business issues. So yes, we do believe that category strategy and supplier strategy consequently, and negotiation strategy consequently, is a good way to address complexity in procurement.
And Elouise, do you echo that, or do you see that from a different perspective?
No, I largely echo that what I would add to it, or I would build on it, to say that to me, category management is the core to how companies build, deliver, sustain their products. And so if procurement is going to be part of those discussions, and I believe procurement should be part of the business, is part of the business, then we have to get clear on what value we're adding. And I think we add value through category management, whether it's supply assurance, supplier relationships, ESG, and so forth. That's the job. And I think that's why I really dislike old category management, because it didn't do any of those things.
Right.
And so the one takeaway I want for the people I work with or just even talk to is to take ownership of the business, of the outcome, of the product, because the category management actually should influence and be tied not only directly to that end product, but to the end consumer.
And I suppose if I pick on a particular angle of addressing that complexity, we've talked about digitalization, of the function for years. As you said, it just happens to be that AI is the current, flavor, and I suspect it's going to be a long-term flavor. Mm-hmm. I mean, I suppose it's a bit of a moot point, but, can procurement teams even attempt to deal with that complexity without using technology and specifically AI? I mean, is it possible? Or is it actually, that is the end of people in category management, that AI is going to, I mean, hold on, I'll come to you first. I can't help myself.
Look, we live in a digital world. Right. We have generations being, I'm of an older generation where I grew up for the last generation without the internet, without mobile phones, where the first thing to do was play outside. So my generation has been part of observing and witnessing this. That said, we have generations now that have grown up with smartphones. We have generations that have grown up with the internet, and now we have generations growing up with AI. Yeah. It's not a debate anymore. Now, those of us that are older, which happen to be the ones in leadership positions and in middle management, we are going to have to adapt or get out of the way, because the way we see the world is not the way the world really is. So absolutely, procurement in some ways is going to get obliterated by AI and all of these technologies, not to overhype it, but not in the way that we think it's going to. And so this busy work of running a sourcing event, of managing invoices, of doing governance activities, all of that should be arguably already today, or in the very near future will be completely automated. Yeah. So when I just talking about category intelligence and this more business-focused category management, that's the here and now, if not very short-term future.
Got it. I mean, Drasko, Cirtuo is founded upon an ever greater involvement of AI in supporting category managers. I mean, what's your take on, how you see AI in the future supporting category managers? Is it the full replacement, or is it just part of the toolkit, which is how we always used to think about technology? What do you think?
I would like to start with the digitalization in general, because when we launched the tool in 2010, we soon realized, and we were actually shocked, even for the mid-sized company, how many data is needed to make a proper category strategy. Development, validation, consequently the execution with all the initiatives. And even for smaller companies, there were millions of data points which need to be connected. As we further developed our technology, but also our client base towards larger corporations, the amount of data has been really tremendous and increasing. And I was actually shocked, found it out that one of our clients has 40,000 category elements in a category tree. So how comes? Maybe just invented complexity, I don't know. Nevertheless, complexity is there. And we also started deploying early AI for the generation of the category strategy with algorithm, with the expert system. Later it will be with some kind of deep learning. So it's making, of course, the life of category managers much easier. It's augmented, it's supported. And we believe that we can clearly detect where the technology will cover the process and where the humans are still needed. So that's an interesting aspect. But it's more and more technology occupying, especially the space of tactical procurement. Why? Because it's tactic. So it's a kind of predictable. There is a kind of mechanism how you can parameterize, put an algorithm on it to actually make it happen.
Joe, I'm going to pick up on this theme of human intelligence and what it is. And I very much like the fact that we Gen Xers, and we can be proud of that. We grew up without tech. We grew up, as you say, playing outside. If I was going to make an observation, as I flew here yesterday, and I don't know how many people in the airport of a certain age bumped into me while walking, while looking at their phone. It strikes me that we've actually swung the other way. We've got a generation, as you say, that are so familiar with technology and completely comfortable with it. I wonder whether the skill sets we have of actually engaging and talking to people aren't such a priority. And it strikes me that from what you've both said, in that complex world, internally and externally, how do we make sure that as we're bringing tech in, we still make sure that human element of procurement is actually able to engage with other people, stakeholders, suppliers? Elouise, what's your take on that?
Well, I think there's a lot to unpack there. I spend a lot of time studying the influencer market, and one of the things that has come out is that, the Gen Xer generation and even the boomers, most of us are not influencers or even understand, and there's probably a collective view that influencing is for like those that are like 25 and younger.
Right.
However, some of the most popular content these days is coming from Gen Xers and boomers that have spent 25 years doing construction, doing plumbing. You want to learn how to fix the leaking sink from somebody that's been doing it for 25 years.
Right.
So I think there's a corollary here, and you're right, that we have become so absorbed in our phones, and I say that as somebody that's absolutely addicted to TikTok. And I just can't, it will not release its grip on me. However, there are elements of relationship management and understanding people that probably the three of us have developed over the last few decades that we can then pass on to help the folks that are just completely digitally enraptured and pull them out and give them learnings that we have. Because at the end of the day, I don't care how much technology you have, business is a relationship. Ultimately, I don't care if you're a Fortune 10, Fortune 100 company and I'm selling whatever I'm selling. At the end of the day, if I'm going to sell a $5 million contract, it's going to be because you and I sat down across the table or had dinner or drinks.
Got it. I mean, Drasko, I know this is a passion of yours because you're passionate about AI, but I've known you long enough to know talking to people and having real relationships, and that is a key to alignment. But I mean, anything you want to add to that in terms of how we actually help the new generation of procurement professionals become better at doing exactly that, having face time and engaging with people?
Yeah, I mean, you actually nailed it in your question where you said stakeholders and suppliers. That's where the human interaction is going to happen. Just to illustrate what Elouise said, when you, for example, want to develop a category strategy, right? Then you need to identify the right stakeholders. Sometimes I spend hours with organizations just to try to understand who are the stakeholders at all. It's human quality. A robot cannot identify all the formal, informal relationships and so on and so on. Then you need to reach out to the key stakeholders. You need to listen to the business language. You need to translate the business language into the business requirements in procurement. Mm-hmm. You need to deconflict, prioritize, validate, escalate, mobilize, So there are many human elements in that game, and which can hardly be substituted by a robot, So we clearly see a nice interaction along the whole procurement process between human intelligence, artificial intelligence, market intelligence. That's something which makes, at least for me, the shift in this year, it's becoming more recognizable that it's going to happen. I'm looking forward to that, So everything which is connected with validation, judgment, risk assessment, and so on, risk appetite, will be human. The remaining part can be digitized and automated at a high extent. And that also requires a mindset shift for actually procurement professionals, because the skills are today more with sourcing and cost reduction, and probably some of the SRM and contract-related activities. We will probably need to have well-educated, not just the leaders, but the staff, the procurement people to make this shift happen and be able to interact and use all the tools and benefits of the AI in the future.
I love it. So a more complex operating environment, with a need for a less complex organisation to be able to cut through it, a role for human intelligence for engagement and artificial intelligence to deal with that complexity. I'll ask you one final question. If there was one prediction you had for the next 12 months, and we will be testing you on this in a year's time, one prediction for what you think is going to be the big emerging thing or the big storyline for the next 12 months in procurement, what would you say? Elouise, what's your bet?
I have to think about that one. Maybe ask Drasko.
Okay, go on, Drasko, what's your bet? What do you think we're going to see in the next 12 months?
I read recently a smart guy said that the future in past was more predictable than it's today.
Right.
With the emergence of the AI. So if I just look back 12 months from now, in this room, preparing for the conference and on the conference, AI was actually not that big topic. So if you see today, it's at least all present. There is a high awareness. There are tools emerging, So I would say we will be surprised how fast it will go, and I would love to see it. Maybe that's because I would like to see it, but it will go quite fast, and it will also push procurement to change. So it's difficult to say what. Of course, AI is today trivial in its infancy, right? We have it here and there, but it will be more and more over time. So I see positive development and hope for a mindset shift in procurement to make it happen.
Wonderful.
I think a couple things. One, I think the ProcureTech market is going to continue to change dramatically. I think the traditional suite providers have been under pressure. They're still clunking along. I keep predicting their demise, and they keep getting further and further closer to that, but it's taking a long time for them to be done. But I also think there's a generation of ProcureTech startups that they're running out of gas, and I think that, and at the same time, if you look at what's happening in like Y Combinator, which is one of the big VCs out of San Francisco, you're going to start to see brand new startups that are ProcureTech that come in and obliterate what we've thought about. Or they'll solve problems that have been really hard to solve for years because they're going to be AI native companies. And so I think that, and I think and my other point would be is there is so much money going into AI platforms, hardware, software, and procurement as just one use case. I think it's going to continue, and we're going to have we're in the midst of another .com boom, which we haven't had for probably 25 years. And so, I know that because I can see it in San Francisco, because it's mostly centered there. I mean, there's other pockets elsewhere, but it's really, people eat and breathe and drink AI in San Francisco, and I think that's really going to, I think we have to see this for what it is as another .com boom.
Got it. I'm not sure I'm going to put procurement, AI, and obliteration into a single sentence, because that probably won't bode well. But look, wonderful insights from both of you. Thank you. It'll be good to see what it looks like in the coming year, and it'll be great to pick up on these topics as we go into Cirtuo's Category Management Conference later on today. But for now, Drasko, Elouise, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Bravo.